What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Fantasy Files podcast, where we talk about our favorite fantasy series and topics. I'm your host today, Spencer, joined by Jim from the Fantasy for the Ages podcast, and we have more of a topical discussion for you today that is sure to be a little divisive and controversial in the SFF community. Everyone's got an opinion on it. But it is one that I think is worth discussing. As we get closer to the release of The Rings of Power and The House of the Dragon, I've been thinking more and more about fantasy and sci-fi adaptations and how I feel about them. I was sitting around the other day thinking about making a video for you guys about this topic, but I thought it might be a good idea to bring on a friend to discuss it with me so that I'm not just regurgitating my own echo chamber, because I have a tendency to do that, like most of us do on the internet. So today we are talking about sci-fi and fantasy adaptations, the good, the bad, and the meh. We're just having an honest chat about them with very minimal show notes. I encourage you all to leave your own thoughts about this topic in the comments below. But as this is one of the most heavily debated topics in the community, I would ask that you please be respectful and remember that anything we share on here is just our opinions and are to be taken with a grain of salt, much like everything on this channel. Except for my opinions on Denna from King Killer. She's definitely the worst. Are you mad yet? Before we get into it, please remember that it helps the channel a lot if you like and subscribe down below and hit the bell icon to get notified when we put up new content. And if you'd like to contact us or just want to hang out, feel free to give us a follow on Twitter at Files Fantasy. This episode will most likely be significantly shorter than our other ones. I'm hoping to keep it under an hour. And in the interest of time, we'll introduce Jim and talk about only one book or series that we've read recently, fairly briefly, if we can. So, Jim, you host the Fantasy for the Ages podcast with your son, Zach. You've been on here before and talked about it a little bit, but would you like to talk about what you guys are currently discussing on your podcast and where people can follow you?
Absolutely, Spencer. It's good to be here again. I'm just chuckling, thinking keeping this under an hour. Remember, you've had me here before. Okay, yeah. We'll try. We'll try.
Yeah.
So Zach and I, we have two different angles on our podcast, which you can find on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. We also have it in every audio place you can find podcasts. We're working through the Wheel of Time. So half of our content is that, and we're getting close to the end of book 4, The Shadow Rising. So good stuff there. Great book, which I don't think you finished yet, Spencer, but
no,
it's a good book.
I haven't.
Really, you got to get back to it.
I know.
Okay. And then, Zach does other things in life, and this is my hobby to just keep doing more content. So I've also got a lot of stuff working through the Dresden Files and then just other odds and ends about fantasy and sci-fi. Find us. We're easy to find, and just look up Fantasy for the Ages, and we'd love to share our content with you.
Awesome. And I will have links to all their stuff down below. I believe they're on Spotify, YouTube. You can also follow them on Twitter, which Jim is very active in. So yeah, check out our description below for all that stuff if you want a quick link. And I'll also mention to everybody, sorry, my voice is kind of weird tonight. I was at a heavy metal concert last night, my first one. My friend dragged me to it. I usually hate heavy metal, but he was like, I got this extra ticket, you got to come. I was like, all right. And so, yeah, I screamed a lot. So
I've never done such a concert. That's impressive. Yeah. You mentioned books we're reading.
Yes.
So what's... I know we were talking earlier. I'm working through Brent Weeks' The Night Angel trilogy.
Yeah.
So, amazing right now. Totally loving that. If people who are listening to this, watching your channel, haven't read it, they've got to fix that.
Oh, yeah.
Now. Drop what you're doing. Go read The Night Angel trilogy. But what are you working through right now?
So I I just read a book called Empire of Silence by Christopher, I think it's pronounced Rocchio, and this is the Sun Eater series. I've
Hmm.
heard about this book or the series for a long time. People recommend it for its prose and its kind of King Killer like storytelling. Have you read King Killer?
Nope. It's a protest. Until
Yeah.
there's a third book, I will
Oh
not go.
no. Oh, that's so sad.
Oh, I hear
Um,
people say that all the time. Jim, you're missing out. No, it's so
yeah,
good.
yeah, for sure. Well, I would say that especially this first book, and I've heard the second book is even better, so I'm super excited to pick it up. But it's basically Red Rising meets King Killer. So when you start out at the beginning of this book, it does the same thing King Killer does, where you kind of have somewhat of a frame narrative. It's all in first person, and
Okay.
it's this legendary hero kind of reminiscing about how he got to be what he is. And so in the current time, he's already a legend. He already has like all these songs that are sung about him and everything, and he's kind of going back and telling you how he got there. But it's in a sci-fi setting, and so it's very it
Okay.
gave me a lot of Red Rising vibes. And yeah, it was fantastic. I really really liked it. The beginning is slow, but it picks up. It really does. All right. Well, I know I said one, but I was really hoping you would tell me about Book of the New Sun.
Oh, all right. Wow. That was something. Okay,
Yeah.
The Book of the New Sun is classic sci-fi with a fantasy twist by Gene Wolfe. There's 4 books in the original set, and then a sequel, a 5th book, really. They came out 5 years after the originals. I read it because Drew McCaffrey, who's one of the co-hosts of the Inking Out Loud podcast,
Oh
recommended
yeah.
it to me. And his podcast is actually working through, like, chapter by chapter through
Oh
this
wow.
series right now. So a great thing to listen to if you're trying to work through it. This was hard.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't just read it and go, "Oh, this is great. I'm loving it." Like I just, went off on Night Angel.
Yeah.
This was work. You had to
Yeah.
work your way through it. It's deep. It's quality writing. The prose is fantastic. Gene
Huh.
Wolfe's vocabulary is ridiculous. He he wrote every book, every word that's in the dictionary somewhere into this series, and then he made up words too.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. But I'm glad I did it. It's something that's kind of foundational
Yeah.
from the 80s, some classic stuff that a lot of people DNF. And I'm like, nope, I got my sticker now. I finished Book of the New Sun.
Was it close though? Did you want to DNF it?
Yes. But I don't do that. I commit, I'd be
Oh,
embarrassed. I wouldn't be able to show my head in these
oh
kinds of
no.
conversations anymore. But I can't bring myself to recommend the series yet. I'm,
For
I'm
sure. Yeah.
pondering it still.
Yeah.
Um, just the general casual SFF fan, it's not for you.
Yeah. Okay. Did that very last book bring you around at all? Did it tie
It
anything up for you?
helped. It
Yeah, okay.
definitely helped. So I would never say just read the first 4. You got to read all 5
Oh,
to
okay.
get the true appreciation. The 5th book definitely made things make more sense. Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. All right. Well, we are going to talk about adaptations here from book to movie or book to TV show. And Jim, I am really nervous. I am nervous to talk about this hot button topic. But we are obviously no spoilers, by the way. We're not going into spoilers of any kind. So, as most of us know, I have very strong feelings on 2 topics: fantasy adaptations, and speaking of King Killer, the current state of Patrick Rothfuss. And believe me, with all the recent controversy, you really don't want me talking about him right now. So, let's start out on a good note, though. What are some of the better adaptations that we've seen?
Wow. Well, there's definitely been some good ones, but I mean, it's easy to go to the ones we hate.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you're making us work first. We're going
Yeah.
to go to the ones that are good.
Yeah.
For me, the one that set the bar up front was Lord of the Rings.
Oh yeah.
The movies were classic, were awesome. They were game changers for what you can bring to the screen. If you're willing to spend enough money and you got a guy like Andy Serkis. The cast was fantastic. The story was delivered well. And what it does with an adaptation is it didn't try to put every word from the book on the page, but it was true to the
Yeah.
story. And I know we'll talk more about that along the way.
Uh-huh.
So that's definitely one for me. I don't want to steal them all. Maybe we should go back and forth a little. What's one that you'd put up there?
So I know this is kind of coming out of left field, but Jim, did any of your kids read the series of unfortunate events when they were younger?
They really didn't. They kind of
Ah,
jumped over that. I'm familiar with the series,
right.
but yeah, they didn't really get into those. So you did, and
Yeah. So
wasn't Jim Carrey part of the adaptation of that?
yeah, he was in the movie, and then
Yeah.
there's now a Netflix show that I think has completely finished up, and it's Neil Patrick Harris doing the Count Olaf.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, both of the adaptations. First of all, I'm a huge fan of that series. Obviously, I haven't read it in like 15 years or something, but when I was younger, I was obsessed with those books. I remember every single thing that happened, and going through especially the Netflix series,
Mm-hmm.
they literally got everything, like
Wow.
everything. They got everything. There wasn't anything that was excluded, and every 2 episodes was one book. And they're short books. They're like little, they're junior high grade books, right?
Yep.
And so there's not a whole lot of content there, so they were able to fit all of that into 2 episodes. And I think they did 3 or 4 seasons to get all 13 books. And man, it was so incredible going through that show, because it gave me that feeling of like, oh, I remember why I loved this so much. And to see them do that so faithfully, even having like lines from the books
Mm-hmm.
in the
Mm-hmm.
dialogue in the show, it was honestly like really, really, really heartwarming to see that be fully
Yeah.
realized in a TV show. So
See,
that's
you're really touching on something that's really a key, that's got to be part of this episode, and that is
sure.
when someone creates an adaptation, what is their goal? Are they trying to bring the books to the screen, or are they trying to recreate the books in a
Yeah.
way that will be fresh and new, and there's no winning decision on this. You
Yeah.
know, fans of a book series will be ready to crucify you if you mess with their book too much.
Yeah.
But then some fans of a book series will be bored if you don't give them anything fresh, if it's just the same thing they already read.
Yeah.
So you can't win this one. You just need to bring something good to the screen. I think that's the only answer.
So I have a pretty good example for that. I don't know if you've ever played any of the Assassin's Creed games,
Mm-hmm.
but there's like a
Oh, I
dozen.
played them badly, Spencer.
Oh,
Really
okay.
badly. Zach is a master. I'm horrible. So yes, I've played them.
Okay, so I this is a very unpopular opinion, and I understand that, but I really liked the adaptation. I really, really liked the movie. And here's why. Because there is what, a dozen or 15 games or something, and in every single one of them, the animus is just a little bit different. It's usually something that you lay back in, and it kind of is like virtual reality, takes you into
Yeah.
the past. But it's always a different model. There's always a slightly different way to do it. In one of the games, there was an animus where you like sat at a desk and you put these like VR goggles on. So there's all these different models, right? And you go into the Assassin's Creed movie, and it's this thing that he gets into, and it picks him up off the ground, and
Okay.
he's able to like move like stationary.
Mm-hmm.
And people were really upset about that, but I was like, No, like they're always different. Like that could totally be an animus. Like that fits within this world and it makes sense. And I'm glad that they did that in a new story, in a new character. It's not Desmond Miles, it's not Ezio, it's this new character with a new
Yeah.
assassin, new story, a new like, secret government project, all this stuff. So it fits within the world without taking away from the games, without trying to recreate Black Flag or something and doing it really badly. They just created a new story within this world. And I think adaptations need to do that more. I think, they
Okay.
just like with Arcane, with the League of Legends show that was on Netflix, that's as far as I understand, and people who are fans of the game let me know in the comments below. But from what I understand, that's a completely new story with like the same like characters and stuff, but it's telling a new story in that world that has nothing to do with the game storyline.
Okay.
And so I think, I think these showrunners, if they really have it in them to be like, no, I don't want to tell the book's story, I want to tell my own story, then just create your own story in that world. I don't need you to try your hand at recreating my favorite story of all time. Like, go ahead and create your own thing, but just make it different.
See, this brings us to one of the bigger adaptations of recent times,
Here we go.
The Wheel of Time. And obviously Zach and I have dug into this deep. And
Yeah.
one season's out already. Second season is coming out sometime, maybe January, maybe December. We're not sure exactly when yet. Probably more likely sometime early 2023. Season 3 is already greenlit. I mean, they're putting a lot of money into it. It's going to be a good show. However, I am still not sure after one full season in whether I'm completely on board with it.
Yeah.
They are producing a good show, but the showrunner, Rafe Judkins, and his crew of writers, they're messing with this show, with this
Yeah.
book series. They are making it, and the term in the fandom does become very popular, is it's another turning of the wheel,
Yeah.
the
That's
wheel of time. So they're saying we're not trying to bring the books exactly as they are.
yeah.
We are re-envisioning a little bit, but we're staying true to the core story, the core characters. And so far that's correct. They haven't messed up fundamentally, but there are fans of the book series that despise this
Yeah.
show,
Yeah.
and that
Me.
others that just love that it's fresh,
Yeah.
and they're getting things that are surprises, and I'm not sure which way I fall.
Yeah.
If I wasn't a content creator, I would probably be uh I'd have the poster as a dartboard and I'd be throwing darts at it. I probably, but I've
Yeah.
been paying more attention, so I'm
Yeah.
probably appreciating it a little different.
So I have a couple questions and a couple comments on that. First of all, somewhere in our show notes, I even have a note that says like, I'm so tired of this alternate universe spin that these shows are putting on it. Like, oh, it's the same characters you know and love. It's kind of the same story that you know and love. It's the same world that you know and love, but it's an alternate reality. And it's just like, like, I
Well,
I it's such a cop out. It's such a
in
cop
this
out.
case though, because
I
again, I've
I
dug deep,
understand. I
they're
know.
not really trying to do that. You know, I've listened to interviews with the showrunner and all, and his Instagram answer questions, Q&As and stuff. And it's more that this series is impossible to bring to the screen as it truly is.
Is it
So they're
though?
having to take shortcuts. They're having to change things in order to tell the story in a way that will make it across on the screen. That's
Yeah.
their story. And in some cases, I can agree with that. In others, I'm still like, no, dude, come on. Really?
So here's a question I have for you as a Wheel of Time lore expert. Um if
That's a big phrase. Woo.
when there is another turning of the wheel, are the same humans in that next cycle, are the same characters, like in a lore friendly way, would there still be a Rand in the next turning of the wheel?
Yes.
Oh,
Now, his name might not be Rand, but
okay.
he'd be the same soul, for lack of
Okay.
a better phrase. Yes. Things come around again and again, including people. Reincarnation is a real thing in the Wheel of Time.
Right. But there would be like a Two Rivers and Tarvalon and all that again.
Yes, it might have different names.
Oh,
It
okay.
might be in slightly different locations, but the same essence would repeat. That's the lore of the Wheel of Time.
Oh,
Yep.
all right. Well, all right. You got me there. Um, um,
So we're talking about the ones we like, and yet we can't help
I
letting
know,
some
I
things
know.
creep in.
Okay,
So let
so
me
let's
toss
go
an easy
back.
one.
Yeah.
Let me toss an easy one. The Witcher.
Yes.
So good.
I was gonna
Not
ask.
100% true to the books. Not 100%, but the books are a mess at times.
Yeah.
So I'd say the series is improving on the books. Can I say that? Is that sacrilege?
Right. Yeah. And here's what I'd like to say about that is like, so I haven't read the books of I haven't read any of the Witcher books, and I think that's why I enjoyed it so much. But and this is going to sound a little hypocritical because I'm sure people on the channel have heard me say like, no, it has to be exactly true to the books. But here's the one instance where I'm willing to give a little bit and say, even if it isn't true to the books completely, it's a good show. Like it's a really like good show in my opinion. Now
Yeah.
with the Wheel of Time, people try to make that argument. I'm like, I like even books aside, I'm still not sure that it's in the end a good show.
And I won't fight that yet. It still has a lot to prove.
Yeah.
Zach and I have talked about that in comparison to Game of Thrones, which was really the first adaptation coming to TV that was saying we can do big fantasy really well.
Yeah.
And it's an accurate adaptation to the books, but the further you get in, the more it parts ways from the
Yeah.
books. And of course, eventually it runs out of books.
Right.
And then it just makes it up itself. And that's where, it kind of goes downhill. But
Yeah.
season 1 of Game of Thrones was killer. It was great.
Yeah.
All the way. Even if you'd never read the books, you were like, whoa. You don't necessarily get that from Wheel of Time.
Right.
You get, well, this is interesting. And it
Yeah.
might be honestly that the source material is harder to work with too. Book 1 of the Wheel of Time is not even close to the best of the source material in the Wheel of Time. The Eye of the World, book
Right.
1. It's one of the weaker books.
Yeah.
But that's where you kind of got to start.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of wonder because I've heard people who hadn't read The Eye of the World, they came out of the show like, I still don't get it. And I wonder if they had stayed truer to the books, if less people, if less muggles would be confused.
Maybe. But I am so glad you just used that word. Because, as you look at my background, I've got things, I've certainly referenced already The Lord of the Rings, and I just talked about Game of Thrones, but the whole background is Hogwarts, okay?
It's so
Harry
great.
Potter was a great adaptation movie series. The first book was really close in being true to the story. They just left a few things out, but they really didn't muck with stuff.
Right.
And even all the way to the end, it was a matter of how much can they bring to the screen. They didn't change things fundamentally. And they did such a good job. So yeah, the Harry Potter series, man, that's an adaptation that nails it.
For sure. Have you heard all the buzz about this Sandman adaptation? This Neil
I've heard the
Gaiman?
buzz, and all I've heard about is good buzz.
Yeah.
I'm ready to start watching it. But I haven't read the source material. I didn't read the graphic novels.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I really want to check it out because people, I was watching Mike's book reviews, his review that he was doing of it, and he was like, there's literally like panel for panel and scene for scene, like it's the same. And I was like,
really
wow,
faithful.
that's really, really cool. And then probably one of the last ones I'd like to talk about is you just read through The Expanse, and and then you finished the show, right?
Yep.
What are your opinions?
Well, it's a really faithful adaptation. to the books. You can be a book fan and love the show. You can be a show fan and never read the books, and you still get the story. It's still true and good. The
Yeah.
problem is the series ends at season 6, which basically is through the first 6 of the 9 books.
Yeah.
They haven't finished the book series, and there are many book fans that agree with me. The series really doesn't start till book 7.
Oh.
And the core thing that you need to confront and experience is book 7, 8, 9. And they don't even get to that. Everything else is set up. Now, until you get to book 7, you don't realize that necessarily. But if you have watched all 6 seasons, right?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, I won't spoil it, but there are things that are obvious in both the 5th and especially the 6th season,
Okay.
which are only there because of the rest of the book series. So they've laid the seeds, but then Amazon got tired of paying the bill, I guess. I mean, it was still successful. I don't know why they stopped.
That's so
and
weird.
The authors of the book series, James S. A. Corey, that's 2 guys, they do say, it's on hiatus. We think it'll get finished eventually. And I was
about to ask, I was like, would you wager that someone else will pick it up?
Yeah, I just need someone else to pick it up because it's so good.
Yeah.
But what's out there, the adaptation, it's really good. I'd recommend it to anybody, whether you've read the books or not. But if you've read the books, you'll just appreciate what's on the screen better.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you understand some of the things they can't show on the screen as well.
Yeah.
They were really faithful. Did a great job.
Yeah, I had gotten through, I think it was season 3, which was basically book 4. I had gotten pretty much all the way through like book 4 in the show, and I was really, really happy with it. Like, obviously they changed like a couple things. There's some characters that they made
condensed.
like one character.
Yep.
But yeah, for the most part, and the casting was so good. I was like, this is literally how I picture them. This is how I picture them in the book.
There were a couple, because I read the books first, where I was like, really? That's what they look like? But the adaptation, the actors did it so well. That's how I see them now.
Yeah.
You know, I can't picture them any other way now. They owned it. They brought those characters to life.
Yeah. Amos was perfect. The guy who played Amos was
But that was one
perfect.
when I first saw him on the screen that didn't fit my image. That didn't fit what I'd read.
Oh,
but
okay.
By halfway through season 1, I'm like, nah.
You're like, Amos. He's Amos.
Yeah, we're good. All right.
One last thing I do want to mention about that Expanse show, just as far as like it's how faithful it is. I was watching, I think it was maybe the 2nd season or something, and it was kind of going through book 2. And I was like, man, there's a lot of scenes that are the same, like they're the same scenes. And my friend Chris, another co-host on our podcast, had been watching ahead of me, and he's also read the books. And one of my favorite scenes from book 2, there's no spoilers, but one of my favorite scenes from book 2 is Amos has a can of chicken, and he beats the living hell out of this guy with this can of chicken. And I've always thought that was like the funniest scene. And all of a sudden we're going through season 2, and I'm texting Chris. I'm like, are they going to do it? Is he going to hit the guy with the chicken? Is he going to hit the guy? And then he bashes the guy.
He hit the guy with the chicken. Yeah.
Oh man. I was like, that's perfect. So yeah, Expanse, great example of a faithful show. I really hope they do pick it up again.
I've got, I racked my brain for other adaptations I thought were good, and I've got 3 others. I don't want to talk about them at length for time, but I do want to mention there's been a lot of adaptions of the Chronicles of Narnia over the years.
Yeah.
But the more recent of the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe adaptation, now recent, we're like 10 years ago or something, but that one was good. Then there were a couple sequels. Forget about them. They're not so good. But The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was a good adaptation. Solid. The second one, very recent, the Dune movie. Of course, just part 1, since there's a part 2 still coming out. But that was a really faithful adaptation as well. Really enjoyed it. A lot of money poured into it, and it shows.
Yeah.
The final one is my other picture here. Now, do you know what that's from? I mean, this is dated. You might not.
Oh, I don't know. Is it The Princess Bride?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
nice.
Now, I've not read The Princess Bride. In fact, when I saw the movie originally, I had no idea there was a real book,
Oh,
but it's a great movie.
yeah.
So I'm going to say it's a great adaptation
For sure.
because it's a
Yeah.
great movie.
Definitely, definitely. All right, so let's go into I really want to talk about, there's been a lot of great adaptations in the past, like around the time of like like you said, the beginning of Game of Thrones and
Mhm.
the Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. What do we think about the current state of adaptations, and more just about like like we'll talk about what we don't like and whatnot, but I'm thinking more like these companies that are buying up all the rights to these stories we love. How do we feel about these big companies trying to, I mean, and they should profit off it, but really looking to profit off of these stories that are beloved by so many fandoms? How do we feel about what's going on with adaptations right now?
I'm happy with this in that we need good stories brought to the screen. We'd fallen into a cycle in Hollywood for a while where they were just remaking past movies.
Yeah.
We don't need more of just the same movie from before, but done with today's technology. No, no,
Yeah.
give us fresh. Now, some of the greatest stories out there are in literature and have never been brought to the screen well. So I'm excited about that. I think that's a good move. I also would speak to, some of the ones that have bought some rights, but then are making something completely fresh. Like I know you wanted to mention, House of the Dragon.
Yeah.
We've got that coming out this month.
Yeah.
That it's completely new source material. There's no books it's based on. It's
Is
referencing stuff that's alluded to in
Oh,
previous, in the books.
I thought
There
there was a book.
no, there is a book, and I have it. I've read it, that talks about the ancient history of
Okay.
Westeros, but it doesn't tell this story. Okay,
Right.
it
Okay.
references these characters and all. So this is fresh, and likewise, we're very close to seeing the new Lord of the Rings adaptation, which I shouldn't say it that way because it's not the Lord of the Rings. Rings of Power.
Yeah.
Again, it's telling a story that's connected to stuff
Yeah.
that's in literature, but it's not actually written down. So I think those things are brilliant and are great ideas as long as they stay faithful,
Yeah.
to what is written. Bring
Right.
it. Give me more. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah,
What do
I
you think?
yeah, so I think that we're kind of in this unprecedented time of getting a ton of our favorite books adapted, which is great in a lot of ways because, for a long time, I don't think anyone ever expected to get like a Lord of the Rings movie. I don't think anybody ever expected to, get a Game of Thrones show because it was kind of just like this kind of niche, like nerd culture kind of thing. Like, why would we ever get a movie for that? So, I feel like, Lord of the Rings happened, The Hobbit happened, which I know people have
Two
opinions
very
about.
different
Yeah,
things
I,
there,
I
my
know, I know, I
friend.
know. I'm just saying they got out there, right? Like they were
Yes.
made. And then Game of Thrones came about and HBO saw incredible success with that. People who had never even thought to read a fantasy book were watching Game of Thrones, and they're
Hmm.
like, "Oh, maybe this is something that we can profit off of." And that kind of leads me into my next point. I feel like, you know, Game of Thrones was obviously made by somebody who is a fan of the source material, or at least they had a team of people who were fans, or at the very least, they had a team of people who respected it. And now I feel like we have these companies, mostly Amazon, who are seeing these fandoms. They're looking at the Game of Thrones fandom, for example, and they're like, we can make money off those guys. if we just have the name, if we have the Lord of the Rings name, if we have the Wheel of Time name, then these people will watch our show and that'll bring in all these viewers. But they don't actually care about the source material. Like they're not like actual fans of it. They're just trying to use this IP to make a profit, which from a business perspective, I understand. But from a fandom perspective, it's kind of like, man, like why are you messing with our stuff? Like go mess with something else, you know?
Now, I don't know the background on Rings of Power. So what you've
Oh,
said could be entirely true about that. But I know it is not at all true about the Wheel of Time adaptation. Because its birth was simply Jeff Bezos at Amazon wanted his Game of Thrones. That's
yeah.
true. But then Rafe Judkins, the showrunner for Wheel of Time, who is an uber Wheel of Time fan,
Do you think he is though?
goes way back. Absolutely. Goes to childhood. He is a true fan. He pitched this thing to Bezos and he got the green light for it. He's crafting something that is his version of the Wheel of Time.
Yeah.
This is not about, though, just raking in the bucks. He's trying to do something very true to how he views the Wheel of Time. As he words it, it's the Wheel of Time Robert Jordan would have done if he was writing it more today than back in the 1990s when he started.
Yeah.
That's really what's driving him to do this the way it is. It's not
Yeah.
about the buck. I mean, he wants to make money
Sure.
because, I mean, it's about the money. It has to be. But
Yeah.
he is extremely faithful. There's some good stories I've listened to of conversations have gone on in the writing rooms about, you can't do that. He's holding to certain things you must be faithful to, which is interesting.
Yeah, I can't get past a lot of the just the way they break the lore though. Like why would
I want to hear more. Give me
if he's such a huge fan of it, why would he let so many things slip? And
like
I guess this will be a slight spoiler for the end, but Nynaeve doing a big like healing thing, and then her basically like dying at the end and getting resurrected. Like that's been mentioned on multiple podcasts I've listened to that is not possible in the Wheel of Time in any
I have
way.
answers for both. If you want them, I have answers
All
without
right.
spoiling too much.
Okay.
Number one, with Nynaeve and that thing you're describing,
Yeah.
she is fully capable of that in the books. She's that level of power. Okay, we do know that. That's canon. She's got that kind of power. In the way they're writing it, it's an adaptation choice that they're escalating how fast she discovers her power, her strength. That's
Okay.
just shortening up a 14-book series into something that they're going to get into maybe 8 seasons.
Right.
So that's that. They didn't give her powers she doesn't have. She just discovered her abilities sooner. The other thing is she didn't die. Now, I agree with you.
That's such a cop
I agree
out.
with you. But if you listen, and you go back and you talk to the show writers and see what their intent was, they filmed it poorly. And that's a COVID issue. They had some restrictions they were dealing with during COVID that made it so they couldn't do it quite the way they wanted. But she wasn't dead, because you're right. You can't resurrect someone. That's 100% true. She was not dead. She was, let's see, how's Princess Bride say it?
She was
Mostly dead.
She was burnt to a crisp though.
No, she wasn't as crispy as the others. You go back and look again, because I have. She wasn't that crispy. She was just well done. I know. It's frustrating to have them do it so poorly that there's those questions and they should do better. I 100% agree. But they didn't actually kill her. Nope. She wasn't dead.
All right. Well, geez, where else were we running? Oh, we were talking about Rings of Power. Now, I want to get out in front of this and say, like, I don't have a huge dog in this race because I haven't read the books, I haven't read the Silmarillion or anything. But just from a marketing standpoint and from just some of the things that I have heard them say, and I also want to get out in front of this a little bit more for all of these adaptations. I don't care about something. I of course don't care about something being diverse or woke or whatever. I think the people that complain about that stuff really just need to get a little bit of a life. We are in a modern age where we need to diversify and show more people on screen than who used to be shown on screen. So that being said, they have done things like fired their lore expert. They had like a guy that taught at I forget which university it was. He taught Tolkien at a university, and they had him on staff, and he was disagreeing with the choices they were making in their lore for the show. And he's saying this would never happen. This is not respectful of Tolkien's vision. And they fired him.
Wow.
Not only that, but Peter Jackson had gotten a hold of them and said, I would love to be involved in this, even just as like an advisor. And they're like, oh yeah, for sure, we'll definitely bring you on to do that. They all exchanged numbers, and he has not been able to get a hold of them the entire time that this has been in production.
That's concerning.
That's concerning. Like, why would you not want to have Peter Jackson like helping you do this? Like, if he's offering some advisory role, the guy that made the best Lord of the Rings adaptation, why would you not want his consultation? And
Well,
so
he did make The Hobbit, remember.
Yeah, but so that basically he had total free reign during the Fellowship of the Ring and like that first trilogy. But then they saw so much success with that, they're like, we want to bring on like this whole writing team. And from what I've heard, that hampered him down a lot, and the team as a whole was making these decisions that he was not super stoked about. And
To
so
any fan, and I hadn't heard that yet, but to any fan, true Tolkien fan, they watch The Hobbit and they see a money grab.
yeah,
They
for sure.
bloated it so ridiculously with extra stories that aren't good.
Yeah,
They don't add anything.
yeah,
Now, that's where I'm hoping with Rings of Power that maybe they won't make that same kind of mistake,
yeah,
because they've obviously, from all the promos, they've elevated Galadriel. She's like the core character. Galadriel is a badass in the series. The original stuff from the first era way back in the Silmarillion stuff, and then, of course, in the Lord of the Rings, but we don't get to really see it because
yeah,
that's not the role she's playing in the original trilogy. But it's hinted at, it's laid out there. And so if they bring that to life, I'm like, all right, that could work. Could.
yeah.
We'll see. But yeah, Tolkien he gets ripped on by modern writers because
Oh yeah.
women really don't exist in his series. So that could be why the lore guy got fired.
Yeah,
You can't do this with a woman being in charge. You're gone. That's
yeah,
it.
for
He's out.
sure. Yeah, I get that. I just think it's just super concerning when you see things like that. And even like I said, I'm like a fan of the movies or whatever, but I'm not like a Lord of the Rings like diehard fan or anything.
Mhm.
But I am a fan of fantasy. I am a fan of respecting an author's creation and all this work that they put into this world that they developed over, sometimes decades. And it's just concerning when you hear that a company was like, yeah, we're just not going to use the guy who knows the most about it. It rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, again, you're spotting a difference between what they're doing with Rings of Power and what they're doing with Wheel of Time.
Yeah,
Because like Robert Jordan's widow, Harriet, is on board with what they're doing with Wheel of Time. Brandon
yeah,
Sanderson, who finished the series, is on board
but
with what they've done here.
he's come out and said that he had quite a few concerns that got ignored as well, though.
I
In
didn't
like,
hear quite a few. I heard a couple of things he wasn't sure that's what he would have done, and definitely one thing he disagreed with.
uh,
And I'm pretty sure I know what that one is now because
Okay.
everybody disagrees with it, but they still had a reason. Okay, fine.
Right. I guess one more thing I would like to touch on real quick is this kind of this trend that is happening. And I have to be really careful with this because this is some of the main controversy that's been all over Twitter for the past week. But it's these producers and showrunners kind of yelling at the fans and like calling them, like racist or misogynist and all this stuff.
Ah,
And we saw it with Cowboy Bebop, and that is one of the most beloved animes ever. And I'm not going to go too far into the details because I think most of the people who know what I'm talking about know the story and it's been talked to death. But one of the actors came out and like made a video on her YouTube or something and just yelled at the fans, calling them all sorts of names. And I want to be clear, there are fans that reach out and say horrible things and make all sorts of accusations at the actors and call them names, and they call their own names. You know what I mean? There's some really dick people out there, and I don't support that in any way. But what I do think is, as an actor, as a showrunner, you block the person and move on because that's just the vocal minority. And I think we all really know that. But to come out and I feel like it kind of alienates the audience to come out and make a video or something saying like, you're all misogynist or you're all racist or whatever it may be. And we saw with Cowboy Bebop that like within the first, I think it was within like the first week or the first 2 weeks, they're like, yeah, we're not doing a second season because nobody watched it after that.
yeah.
It's like, yeah, I mean, if you call your audience a bunch of names, chances are they probably won't want to give you what's in their wallet, you know?
Unfortunately, it's a symptom of what society, especially in America, has
Yeah.
become in recent years. You can't just not like something. The group that feels that it's a good thing is gonna accuse you
Yeah.
of being, like you said, racist, misogynist, wo- anti-woke, or
Right.
whatever. You know, and likewise, people who feel that they don't like something because they're making it too woke, they're messing with nationalities or whatever. I mean, Wheel of Time has dealt with a lot of that,
Oh yeah.
and it's like, okay, the way they cast Wheel of Time does not fit my vision at all.
Sure.
So what? It's
Yeah.
their choice. It's a creative work.
Yeah.
I can choose to say I don't want to watch that.
Right.
I can disagree with it. I would never be sending vitriol and hate at them over their choices, which some book fans have done. But likewise, some people who are on the side of the show and where it's going are just as disparaging of those who disagree with it.
Yeah.
I hang out with a lot of content creators who are in the camp of, oh, Wheel of Time TV series is great. What they've done with it, this is what we needed. I'm not sure I always agree,
Sure.
but they don't necessarily talk very kindly about people who disagree with them. And that's what
Yeah.
America has turned
Oh
into.
yeah, for sure.
And that's what you saw with Cowboy Bebop, unfortunately.
Yeah,
We ought to be able to disagree peacefully. We really should be able to.
I know.
I can
Yeah.
disagree with a person and still like the person. It's fine.
Yeah.
We used to do that all the time in America.
Right? I
Man.
know. Oh, the last one I want to talk about here, just because I think it's such a great example of exactly what I hate about some of the most recent adaptations, is the Halo show.
I've been waiting for
Um,
you to say something about this
yeah.
because I haven't watched it. And you're telling me
So,
it's not worth my time? Is that
so
what I'm hearing?
I haven't watched it either. Chris,
Oh,
our other co-host, has watched it, and I've heard from many people, and seen some scenes and whatnot. It completely backfired on them, and
wow.
I'll ask you: do you think that you need to be a fan of a series in order to make a good adaptation?
Hmm. No, you don't have to be a fan of the series, but to make a true adaptation, it probably helps.
Right. I think that at the very least, you need to have a very high respect for the source material. Even if you don't like it, just the recognition that there are millions of people that
Mm,
like this thing
yeah.
and like trying to make it for them and trying to like give that fandom something. I think that that is important. And the people that made the Halo show straight up came out and they said, we didn't play the video games, we didn't read any of the books, we didn't look into any of the lore. We are doing this completely fresh. They basically took the characters that everybody knows,
Yeah.
like Master Chief and Cortana,
Hmm.
and they took these characters and put them into a completely different world, like not even the same. Like, oh, it's so weird. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
It
And it's
goes to, who are you making the show for?
yeah,
If you're making it for the fans, well, you better be faithful. If you're
yeah,
just using it as source material to make a great show that anybody might enjoy, well, that might be different, and that was probably the gamble they went with, and it sounds like it hasn't worked.
yeah. So that leads me to my other question. Um, so what I've heard a lot, especially around the Wheel of Time, is people saying, well, they need to make this show not only for the fans, but for the people that have never read the books and people that are just
Mhm.
fans of shows.
It's true.
But I guess my rebuttal would be, you know, there's such a huge fandom, and I'm not just talking about the Wheel of Time, but for any big fantasy IP, there's such a massive fandom that all enjoy those books. If they adapted it faithfully, not only would they get the support of the entire fandom that made the author tons of money just by sheer numbers, they would probably all go over to the show if it was faithful. But also, if the book is a good story, if you have faith in the story of the book and that this huge fandom loves it, if you made that faithfully, wouldn't the rest of the people who have never read the book, wouldn't they also find a good story there?
It sounds like a good argument, and I won't say it's not a good argument, but Wheel of Time being a great example. The first book was written in 1990, the
Right.
last book in 2013. The world changed a lot over that time period. So if you brought a book from 1990 and brought it to the screen exactly as it was portrayed in 1990, it's not necessarily relevant to the people getting it today in today's context. That's a real challenge. And that's something
Good
they have
point.
tried to address in modernizing the Wheel of Time. And not easy, because again, you've got people who read it in 1990 and love it,
Yeah.
and they don't want you to mess with their book. We've had to tell people who are unhappy with the TV series, hey, you've always got the books. Let it go. The show's not for you then.
That brings us to our next bullet point. So you said we've always got the books. We can always go back to the books. Does a bad adaptation ruin the series as a whole? Does it put a little bit of a stink on the series at all?
And I would say a strong no.
Okay.
Um, a good example, Shannara, the
Oh
MTV
yeah.
adaptation, which I detest. I hate down to the fiber of my soul because I was so excited. It was coming out. I love the Shannara books, and
Yeah.
and now the series, the Shannara Chronicles, was just a piece of garbage. Now my son felt different. Zach liked it.
Oh.
He didn't read the books. So,
Ah,
it was written for a modern audience. It was written for not me. And
right.
it was so not connected with the series
Wow.
that I hate it. Does not change how I feel about the books. So it's a great
Okay.
example.
All right. So yeah, I would say that I 98% agree with you.
Okay. All
Um,
right.
I think that
Is there a 2% that got to you?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit complicated for me because um I had just basically DNF'd the Wheel of Time TV show. And I went into the fourth book, and this is like I have maybe one or two examples of this, but I went into the book and it was right at the height of my rage for that show. It was right at like how mad I was at that show. And I went into the fourth book, and I think that's part of the reason why I
Hmm.
didn't finish it, because the whole time I was reading it, I was just thinking about this TV show that I hated, even though, the fourth book is well past the events of the first, season. I
Yep.
understand that. But something about it, man, there was something like every time I would start up the book, I would think about the show, and there would be like this kind of like psychological connection between the two.
That
And
hurts, man. That
I
hurts
I
me for
know, I
you.
know.
That you're saying the show has ruined the books for you, and that's
No, no, I don't think it has forever, but at the time, certainly. I think part of the reason why I stopped reading the fourth book was, there was a lot happening on the podcast, and there was other books I really needed to read, and I had like 30 hours left of this book or however long it was. And yeah, and so that was a major factor. But also, yeah, every time I would start it up, there was just kind of like this feeling of like, oh, I just don't feel good right now when I read it. But
yeah.
a completely different example is the Dresden Files adaptation. I had read, I think I had read all or most of the books when I finally watched the adaptation, and I didn't care at all. It wasn't a good adaptation, but I wasn't like super upset with it, and I don't know why. It's this one example out of all the other ones where I'm just kind of like, and I think, I think it's just because I love the book series so much that I probably feel similar to the adaptation, like how you do about the Wheel of Time adaptation, because the Wheel
Yep.
of Time is like your thing, right? Like it's your
It's a
love.
great. I love this show, and I want the TV show to be successful.
Yeah,
Therefore,
right.
yeah.
Right. And I think that's kind of how I felt about the Dresden Files adaptation. I watched the adaptation well after it was canceled. But it really didn't put that much of a it didn't like hurt me that bad. I was like, yeah, okay, it's certainly not the books, but it's still fun. Like I still enjoyed watching it. Harry's got a hockey stick that he carved runes on, and that's his staff. And it's kind of like, okay, like Harry wouldn't do that. But at the same time, it was fun, it was funny, it was campy. I enjoyed it for the most part.
I you know
And so that's a
the
weird.
TV adaptation for Dresden Files was my first introduction to the
Oh,
Dresden
really?
Files, and I watched it when it was on originally in 2012.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, "Oh, there's books about this," but I still didn't touch the books for years.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed the TV series. I was sad it was canceled,
Yeah.
and the actors that played Harry Dresden and played Karen Murphy,
Yeah.
still sometimes I kind of picture like those guys, that I don't know. I enjoyed the show.
That's funny.
But you're right, it's very different from the books.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, for the most part, I do think that, you do always have the source material. You can always go back to it. But leading into my next point, with how, in my opinion, I understand this is my opinion, in in how bad all of these adaptations have been lately, as far as being faithful to the source material, even The Witcher, like I am worried about having a Dresden Files adaptation, because I am legitimately worried that it would in a small way ruin the series for me. And I really don't want it to. And so my take on this currently, until we get some better adaptations, is please just don't make a Dresden adaptation right now. Please just do not make one. I know that.
Honestly, I think it would struggle to
Yeah.
be successful because there is nothing woke about the Dresden Files. It would just offend the heck out of most of the cancel culture. So
yes.
no, let's just keep it to the books.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel pretty strongly about like, please just don't make the show. And I'm worried about slightly worried about, I guess Brandon Sanderson just sold the rights to Mistborn.
Yep, that's actually been in the works for a while. So yeah, he made some announcement about it recently. You're right.
Yeah. And so, I really loved Mistborn, but I'm not like a longtime fan of it. But I do hope they do it well. I really hope that they make a good adaptation. And I wish I could say that I've heard somewhere that Brandon Sanderson was like, if I sell the rights to this, I want to be totally involved, but I haven't heard that. And I
understood that he was going to, it was one of the conditions all along. I don't know if this is in ink anywhere, but that he would be, and like, I think he already did write the screenplay for it.
Oh, cool.
So it was his intention. He'd be adapting it to the screen.
That's good. That's good.
But Mistborn is custom made, tailor made.
Yeah, for the screen.
It's very cinematic.
Yeah.
And the lead character is exactly what today's culture wants to see. I mean, Vin is,
all the things.
All the things. It's a great story, though. I enjoy it.
Yeah, I love Mistborn.
Era 2's better, though.
I don't agree with you, but I loved Era 2. I really did. A lot of people give it a lot of crap. I really, really loved it.
It was so entertaining.
Yeah.
And I'm waiting for the last book now, coming out,
Oh, November. Yes. I'm so excited. I also wanted to mention in that same vein that Jim Butcher, when that Dresden Files adaptation was being made, I was listening to a podcast recently where he said, I think they called me like one time during the production of that.
Mistake.
He's like, I had nothing to do with that show.
Should have been. Yeah.
He was like, I had absolutely nothing to do with that show. And so I know that I have heard from him that if he were to sell the rights, if he were to make an adaptation, then he would be like 100% involved.
I don't know. I'm just being snarky, but maybe already back then they were like, no, we can't let him help or no woman will watch the show.
Yeah, for sure.
My wife's read the first couple of the books and they're fine, but she's like, my daughter tried and she went, no.
Did you tell her it gets better in regards to that?
Yeah, but
it's
they're
still...
like, that doesn't excuse what I'm reading now. And all right, fine.
All right. So what would make us super confident in an adaptation of a Dresden Files TV show or movie, or really any not just Dresden Files, any adaptation? What are we looking for as fans to hear in the production of these adaptations? What do we want to see?
Man, I don't, I'm worthless on this question because there's no magic answer on this one. We've talked about Wheel of Time at length. And we're talking about the same exact show with very different perspectives.
Right.
Even though, I know the people who are involved heavily with the show care about the show. And even though Harriet, who's the widow and editor of the series, is totally on board. And yet the fans are like, no, it's horrible. So I don't know. I have no idea how you make people happy. There's no way to please everybody for certain.
Yeah, I think they could have tried though, but
they did, but they didn't try the way you're looking for. And that's the problem. I think if they had created Wheel of Time just like it is on the print page, be a whole bunch of people writing it off as irrelevant and out of touch.
And here's the thing. I don't think it needs to be word for word, but and here's where a large part of my anger towards the show came in. It's like, okay, if you want to cut stuff out, I totally understand. Peter Jackson did that with the Fellowship of the Ring.
Sure.
And, he cut, there was scenes that people really wanted to see that just couldn't make it into the movie. I totally understand that. But if you are cutting things down for the sake of time, why would you add stuff that never happened? And that's where a lot of my like issues come into play. Is it just doesn't make any sense to me. There's so many scenes in that first book, and I understand there's a lot of traveling in that book. There's a lot of long stretches of maybe more boring stuff, but it's like there's so many scenes that are pivotal that fans really love that didn't make it in. And it's like,
Mhm.
why would you put in this other stuff that didn't even happen? I think it was episode 4 was the episode with the guy who is crying over his Aes Sedai the whole episode. And like it's a very sad episode, and I get that, you know, it was a good performance and everything, but I
I
was
think
just
just
like,
5, but
oh, 5. Okay. I was like, why is that in the show? Why is that in the show? I I don't know.
but it's yeah, creative license. They're
Yeah.
trying to express things they didn't think they could express as well,
Yeah.
just using the stuff from the book. And maybe, yeah, that's overreaching. Maybe
Yeah.
they're trying to decide they know better than the author did.
Yeah.
But I don't know television.
Yeah.
So there are things that it would be difficult to express. I'll give one great example that I think is true.
Mm.
So much in that first book of what we see about Perrin is in his head. It's
Yeah, I've heard
impossible to
that.
show it on screen. So they made intentional changes in what they did with that character to try to bring out, in a way you could see, some of the inner struggles that are expressed in the book. So
But
that's an
but
example of some things they intentionally change or add because they're trying to get across something they can't just bring to the screen.
so I've heard the characters' thoughts argument a lot. And I understand that, I really do. But wouldn't you also be able to have that stuff just in an out loud conversation with another character rather than changing the whole, like their whole character arc?
You can, but that gets old really fast.
Yeah.
There's, way too much. There's a word for it, and I forget it at the moment. Um, just, well, exposition. Just way
Yeah.
too much
Ah,
exposition. Too
yeah.
much. They're just talking instead of doing. TV is a mode for doing stuff.
Right.
Show us, don't
Yeah.
tell us.
Yeah.
And yeah, to substitute the way you're saying, they'd have to do an awful lot of talking.
Yeah, that's true. So I guess to go back to the original question, what I would look for as a fan of, like, if I was as a fan of the Dresden Files, what I'm looking
Mhm.
for in an adaptation is the right medium. Every single one of them would watch it if it was animated. I think it needs to be animated. Um, so I think it's about the right medium, and I think it's about hopefully having somebody that is a fan of the show create it, and not only a fan of the show, but someone who has a love for not only the source material but for the fandom, and they want to give the fandom, you know, this thing that they're going to enjoy. Because I really think that what these production companies are going to realize is that if you don't have the fandom on board with your show, it's going to get trashed, and you know it won't get the larger audience that you're looking for. But if you do stay true to it, while also, you know, making it maybe a little dumbed down or a little, you know, whatever for larger audiences, but staying true to the core of the story and the core, you know, plot points and character arcs and everything, then you're going to get those fans raving about the show. Look, you know, just look at Arcane. People who were fans of the games just fell in love with that show, and that fandom cried out about that show until everybody watched it. And so I think that if you really get the fandom behind your show, then it'll spread. That'll do the work for you.
There is a counter argument, and its
Okay.
name is Game of Thrones, in that it came out and did its thing, and most of the people raving about the show never read the books. They just fell in love with this unbelievable phenomenon on HBO,
Yeah.
and they still will never read the books. And so that's the target some of these shows are going for. Create just something that attracts so many people in that it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what the true book believers mean and want and how bad they're bashing it, because we're going for the Game of Thrones win.
Right. Right. Yeah. I don't know. I think do you think though that the people who had never read the books that initially got into this show, like where did they hear about it from though? They had to have heard it from the fandom, I would think.
I don't know. I mean, HBO was a subscription service and they really marketed it well at first.
Huh.
I didn't hear about HBO, not HBO. I didn't
Game of
hear about
Thrones.
Game of Thrones till there was already 2 seasons out.
Yeah.
And then I binged them.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, I'm a book guy, so I
Yeah.
hadn't read them either. When
Oh,
I heard they were on, I found the books. I
okay.
read the books. Then I watched the show." But a lot of people didn't hear about it at first, but the people who had found it, who had watched it, loved it and couldn't
Yeah.
shut up about it.
Yeah.
And that's what did stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Um, I guess my last point on that is that for an adaptation, like I said before, I want the author really involved. I want
Mhm.
the author like I don't understand some of these adaptations just not having the author involved. And obviously with Wheel of Time, that's not really a the author is gone. They can't have him there to advise or anything. But like with Rings of Power, they had a lore expert. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole again. I'm just saying. But like with a Dresden Files adaptation, I would want to see Jim Butcher really involved, or someone in the community who is a known, Dresden Files expert or something. I would want to see something to that effect.
Wheel of Time, by the way, does have showrunner. They have a staff expert on Wheel of Time who's well known throughout the community, who is their consultant on everything they're doing. So it doesn't solve everything for everybody, but
are they doing a good job though? Are they doing a
I
good
think we're
job?
going to need to see more of this show before we know. I
I
think
know.
they've intentionally done some things and made some choices that aren't going to make sense until
Yeah,
we're 3 or 4 seasons in, and then we'll go, "Oh, now I see what you were doing." All
I
right.
know. Yeah, I obviously won't be watching the second season, but I will be listening to I'll be listening to the community to see,
There you go.
hey, with season 2, they got a lot closer to the books. They heard the outcry from the fans. And that's the other thing, we're kind of going into this last question, which is what needs to change in the industry to make adaptations better. And I've seen a lot of these first seasons come out, the fans have an outcry, and the showrunners just like, no, we're just going to ignore what the fans are telling us they want. And that blows my mind, man. That blows my freaking mind. Now, look at the movie, the first Sonic the Hedgehog movie. I know that's a weird example,
I
but
can't say that I've seen it.
yeah, when the trailers first came out, they had made this CGI hedgehog that looked like they were trying to make it like photorealistic. And so he had, instead of having like his spikes or whatever, he just had this fur, and it just looked weird, like really, really weird. The movie was about to release. It was close to release, and the fans just gave an outcry. They're like, that does not look like Sonic the Hedgehog. You need to make him look more like he does in the cartoons, more like he does, like just give us the 3D video game Sonic. That's all we want. And so they they stopped their release schedule on that. They went back, they redid all of the CGI for Sonic the Hedgehog in that whole movie, and that movie blew up. It had an awesome opening weekend. I went and saw it. Like I'm not a huge Sonic fan, but I went and saw it purely because they listened to the fans and they made the changes. And that's a big
Hmm.
change.
Yeah,
Um,
that's an expensive
that's
change.
an expensive change. And so I was like, you know what? You earned my $20. You know what I mean? So I think that these producers and showrunners, they like, when you have a season one and you hear the outcry from the fans, adjust accordingly. If you're hearing the same things
Yep.
over and over, just adjust that a little bit.
You're probably right. The smart ones will. They'll
Yeah.
listen, they'll make some adjustments. The others will be canceled by season 3.
So that is something sorry, I know I'm going long, but that's something I wanted to
Yeah,
touch
you
on
said
earlier.
hour.
I know. Sorry, guys. So so we have these shows that are coming out. I think even doesn't Rings of Power, isn't it already like scheduled for 2 seasons or something? Like Wheel of Time came out and they were like, immediately we got a season 2, we got a season 3. Why are we getting these season 2 and 3s of these shows where we haven't even, they haven't even gotten the critiquing from the fans yet? They haven't even gotten the response from the audience. Like, what if the first season just completely floundered? Like, would they really want to make a season 2? Like, why commit to that? That's just the weirdest thing.
Well, just because you commit doesn't mean you can't change your mind. I'll say that for
That's
one
true.
thing. Second, I think that commitment to a season 2 before season 1 drops gives the fans more reason to get invested because they know
Yeah.
it's not going to be a one and done. So
Yeah.
cool. I'm going to watch this knowing there's going to be more. That's definitely a couple of the key points there. I think some of it might be financial too. If they know they're building stuff for season 1 that they'll be using as well in season 2, that sort of thing plays in.
Yeah, I almost wonder if they're like, we already know that we need to have 3 seasons before we can get everyone on board. We know that we got to get to this episode in the 3rd season where everything ties together perfectly. And so I wonder if it's some like long-term planning like that. I don't know.
That certainly could have something to do with it. And again, I think it just does help, get people excited about it. And also when they make that decision, and this was the brilliant thought, it just came back. When they
Oh, nice.
make the decision, they are sometimes paying attention already. What are the early viewers saying about it? What are the critics saying about it? Are they getting some green lights from the people who tend to know?
Yeah.
As much as you've commented with Wheel of Time on the hate that's out there, the show had incredible ratings. It set records for Amazon streaming when it dropped. They got their money's worth with season 1. Doesn't matter how many people don't like it. A ton of people liked it.
Yeah.
And if you go and you look at, what kind of ratings it had, it's impressive. And they're banking on that.
Critic reviews or audience score, do you think?
More the audience score.
Oh, interesting.
If you look at Rotten Tomatoes, for example, which is, both critic and fan, but they're separate. You look at the fan ones, it's got a lot of love and then it's got the hate. It doesn't have much in the middle, but it has a lot more love. Than it does hate. So
I think it's funny when a show comes out and it gets really bad critic scores, but it gets a really high audience score.
I'll usually like that show.
Yeah, for sure. Me too. Like the Terminal List. I don't know if you've seen the Terminal List.
We're like through season 5 or can't talk. We're through episode 5 now.
It's so good.
Yeah. We've been watching it the last few days. It's very good.
Oh man, I binged that whole thing in, I think, over 2 nights. It was during my move. My buddy came over to my place. We were packing and just
don't tell me the ending.
I won't.
Don't tell me the ending.
I won't. But yeah, I loved it. I thought it had a fantastic ending. It had a great arc throughout the whole season.
Chris Pratt's doing a great job with that role. Very impressive.
He was so good. And
yes, long ways from Parks and Recreation, man.
Right. I know. I was like, this is the same guy that played Andy Dwyer.
That's hard to believe.
Yeah, but it had really bad critic reviews, but really, really high audience score. Really high. Yeah. And so I think
critics know nothing.
I know, that's what I'm saying. By the way, real quick, have you seen Reacher?
No, only the bad movie, which wasn't too bad. It's just Tom Cruise looked nothing like Jack Reacher. But
after
the show has a different guy who does fit.
It's so good.
I just haven't watched it.
Okay, yeah. After Terminalist, you got to go on to Reacher because it's so good.
How about the Jack Ryan with what's his name from The
John
Office?
John Krasinski.
Have you watched any of that? Because I have. It's great.
No, I need to go back and try it again. I watched a couple episodes, but I think at the time it just wasn't what I was looking for.
Okay.
But
Okay. Well, we
it's
enjoyed
not,
it.
yeah, it wasn't bad or anything. I just wasn't in the mood. Definitely got to go back and check it out.
So many adaptations.
So many adaptations, so little time. Yeah, any final thoughts, any other adaptations you loved or anything else you'd like to say about this industry or what they need to start doing or stop doing?
It's a really good time to be a science fiction and fantasy fan. And part of it is what I'm enjoying now is they have the ability, whether movie or television, whichever, the technology exists to do things really well. And so they keep doing it.
Yeah.
And I hope we never return to the old sci-fi bad movies and editions. I watched the cheesy B-level stuff anyways, but
yeah,
we've moved beyond, and it's a really good time. Even if we don't agree with how they adapt, the quality of what we're getting is amazing these days. Just keep it coming.
Yeah.
I'll keep throwing my money at it.
Yeah, like I was saying at the beginning, who would have ever thought, 20, 30 years ago, who would have ever thought that we would get some movies and TV shows like this? It's pretty wild. I just hope they kind of figure it out.
Just a little mouse, a rumor tells me. Are you a fan of the Twilight adaptation?
So I'm not a fan, but I'm not a fan, but I did read the first couple books and I saw the movies. And I feel like they got it pretty close. I think that it's not a good movie. It's not a good book.
Well, that's the problem. Yeah, the adaptations aren't bad, but it's the source material that
they're very faithful. Yeah.
Okay, we're good. Yeah. I watched the movies. I only read the first book, but yeah. All right, just we needed to clear the air on that.
For sure.
So, yeah. All right, everybody feels better now.
Yeah, I guess I'll leave us on a little bit of a positive note. And for my final thoughts, I'll just say, if nothing else, it is bringing new people into fantasy who would have never been into fantasy. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing this trend now where you're no longer some loser nerd to be into this kind of stuff. Like it used to be where you'd read fantasy books at night or out in your car during lunch or whatever, because I don't want people to know that I'm like a total geek or whatever. But nowadays, so many people are reading fantasy. That's why BookTube is so big. So many people are getting into this stuff. My buddy that I'm rooming with right now, he works at a restaurant, and he was randomly talking to one of his coworkers, and they mentioned the Dresden Files. And he's like, wait, do you read the Dresden Files? He's like, oh yeah, I'm a huge fan of it. And then another one of his coworkers was like, oh, me too. And it's like, how did this happen? How are so many people into fantasy and sci-fi now? It's opened it up to a whole new audience. I think the adaptations are, largely to thank for that. And, you get people who jump on the bandwagon. And, I saw lots of people probably in the Wheel of Time community that were like, oh, I've always been a fan of Wheel of Time. It's like, have you? But for the most part, I think that we're getting, a wider reach, and we're getting more people into these books. And, I don't think that that's a bad thing.
Yep, I'd agree. There's a progression that makes a lot of sense. The Lord of the Rings came out, brought people into realizing fantasy is something real, something big. Maybe I should check this out more. Then the Harry Potter books came out.
Yeah.
And then movies adapted them. That raised a whole generation going, fantasy, wow.
Yeah.
And then, we got to Game of Thrones, which made it total mainstream. But all that previous stuff had set the stage for the mass of fantasy, fantasy, and now it's just all exploding, and it's brilliant. I love
Yeah,
it.
it's wild. That's a great point about the Harry Potter generation, because everyone that I grew up with watched those movies
Yep.
religiously.
Hmm.
And you're right. It brought up an entire generation and introduced them to fantasy in a very clever way.
Yes.
Um, and I think we're seeing the results of that. And that's also why whenever I tell somebody about the Dresden Files, I tell them, imagine Harry Potter grew up and became a private investigator in Chicago. That's always how I sell it, because there's so many Harry Potter fans. Even if you're just a casual fan, if you hear, oh, it's like Harry Potter but grown up and in the modern, Chicago, like, I it's a pretty
Hmm.
good. I've gotten quite a few people
It's a
on
good
board that way.
analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Hey, what's up, guys? Spencer from the editing room here at about midnight. And as I'm editing this, I realized I had one more final thought that I really wanted to get into this podcast, but forgot to mention it here at the end in final thoughts. We're seeing a lot of fantasy fans who are basically hate watching some of these shows and then complain about the shows while they continue to watch them. And whichever side you fall on regarding these shows, I want you to know your opinion is valid. Everyone is entitled to feel a certain way about this stuff. But just remember that if you're not enjoying something, you need to vote with your wallet, because that is the only way things will ever change. This is a concept I believe in very strongly. If these giant corporations who are ultimately in it for the money continue to make money off these shows, they're not going to see a reason to change what they're doing, because why would they? For example, as a construction worker, if I were to build really crappy houses and receive no repercussions and make really good money doing it, why would I take the time to hone my craft? If I was just in it for the money, which I believe companies like Amazon are, why would I ever feel the need to better myself? I wouldn't. If you feel the same way I do, vote with your wallet, which means stop watching, stop giving them the clicks and the views. Otherwise, nothing will ever change. If a restaurant keeps serving you rotten food, you stop eating there. The same thing needs to happen with these adaptations. Otherwise, it will get worse and worse and worse. It's the same reason why I don't pay for Patrick Rothfuss to Twitch stream. I don't want to watch him play Minecraft. I want that third book. Eventually, he'll run out of money and realize that he needs to work on the new book. I know I'm rambling a bit here, but seriously, vote with your wallet. I'll get you back to the final bit of the episode here in a second, but despite my feelings towards some of these most recent adaptations, I truly hope you find whatever shows, movies, books, or video games bring you joy. Life is too short not to enjoy things. So if you love the Wheel of Time show or Rings of Power or whatever it may be, I truly wish you the best and encourage you to keep enjoying those things, because you deserve it. And thank you for giving me an outlet to express my feelings on this topic. All right, back to the episode. All right. Well, Jim, thank you so much for joining me for this very divisive hot button topic. I'm really eager to see, what kind of comments we get on this video and how many people, yell at us. So thank you.
They're yelling at us. That means they're watching it.
Yeah. Thank you for shouldering that burden with me.
It's always a pleasure, Spencer. Anytime.
All right, guys, that is going to wrap us up for today. Thank you so much for joining us for our little chat about the current state of SFF adaptations. If you're a fan of the Dresden Files, be sure to check out Jim's channel linked below, and the episode that I will be on is getting posted on the 14th, which has probably already happened by the time you're watching this video. But definitely go check that out. We'll be discussing Changes, one of the later books in the Dresden Files series. I'll have all of the Fantasy for the Ages stuff linked below. Be sure to check them out. And if you enjoyed this content, drop us a like and a subscribe down below. Don't forget to hit the bell icon to get notified whenever we release new content. As always, follow us on Twitter if you'd like to see us comment on other topics like this one, or if you just want sci-fi and fantasy recommendations. I usually am pretty good about updating our Twitter with what we're reading and just the general idea of how we feel about it. I'm not sure what episodes are coming up after this one, but we are currently working on a series of videos where we have other content creators on the show for off-topic conversations about content creation, fantasy in general, video games, cars, or whatever the conversation leads us into. So keep your eyes peeled for those. And until next time, if you find a magic lamp, please just do us all a favor and ask the genie for a really, really rock solid Dresden Files adaptation or the third book in the King Killer Chronicles.
Then I'd finally read it.
Yeah.